This is Matt Nelson of the Word on Fire Institute, and I'm here now with the Fellow of Education in the Institute, Robert Mixa. Robert, you're talking about evangelization and education, and I'm curious, how did your thinking about education come to be? You know, you've got experience as a teacher in the classroom. Does it go all the way back to then? Like, are there experiences or things you learned when you were in the classroom that have really impacted today how you see education?
Well, it all started in kindergarten. I'm joking, but I've been thinking about my education like for my entire life. When I was in high school, I had a really weird kind of educational experience. I was in one Catholic school that was doing things one way, and then I went to another Catholic school that was doing things an entirely other way. And so I was kind of always wondering, well, why the difference? And so I started thinking an awful lot about, like, kind of, if you want to say, the philosophy of education and what's a kind of governing vision of things in the Catholic school. And so what would make like a Catholic school authentically Catholic? And I thought of that like throughout my career, but especially when I was teaching. You know, a lot of schools these days are trying to kind of like return in some sense to their Catholic identity. They're trying to actually teach a lot of the teachers, maybe who haven't been well catechized, what it means to be Catholic. And I found myself in the classroom trying to kind of communicate the same thing to the students. So while I was teaching, the school I was teaching in was going through this kind of this transformation, and I started to think, well, what does this involve? And in many respects, it involves evangelization, but it also just means like inducting people into the narrative, the grand narrative of salvation history. And so I started kind of connecting evangelization, education, and eschatology, and I started to think that there's actually a link there. And so I brought that into my classroom as much as I could, just kind of starting with this grand kind of vision, which I was bringing all the students in. And a lot of the students started to see, well, how does that relate to other things? And so I said, guys, you guys are actually giving your assent to the incarnate Logos. And so they started thinking of, well, wait a minute, Logos is in many of the subjects that we're studying, biology, and so many others like that they started to think of Jesus in a very different way. And so I started to see that actually within my classroom, I was giving them, I think, a good Catholic vision of education.
Yeah, because, I mean, St. John himself in his gospel kicks off the gospel by referring to Jesus as the Logos.
Yeah.
So if it's true that there's a centrality of this idea, then it's absolutely essential from an educator's perspective, especially in a Catholic school. But I suppose you might want to say a bit in a little while about the advantage then of a Catholic school being Catholic versus secular. But if the Logos is central to this, that means that Jesus is central. So you got to know Jesus, or you're going to miss a whole bunch of important aspects of what it means to educate and be educated.
Yeah. I mean, we believe in the Logos incarnate. And so we see that something happened in history. And in the Paschal Mystery, he defeated sin and death, and he inaugurated an entirely new creation. And so that, in some ways, that we're in the new creation that is growing and growing, and eventually Jesus will bring the new creation to the Father in the end times. That view has to influence how we're forming the students. And it also has to influence even things that you think may not be related, because they're giving their allegiance to the Lord who is love. And so even in some field like STEM, okay, they're serving some end, okay?
Right.
And so I want them to see, well, how does that, if what ends am I serving?
By end, you mean purpose, right?
Yeah, so like a teleology, okay? So it's like, it's going somewhere. And is this actually in congruence with the ultimate Lord, the Lord who is love?
It's a really good point. But I know, like, speaking of ends or purposes, you were talking about eschatology a moment ago, which is a big word that maybe a lot of people haven't heard before. So I think at this point, what would be interesting is to hear from you about the link you draw between eschatology, and you can explain what that is in a second, evangelization and education.
Yeah. So the term eschatology, by that I don't mean what most people think is like kind of death, final judgment, resurrection. It entails that. But what I mean is the Greek word eschaton, which just means like the last or the end. Okay, so it's kind of the trajectory. Like you use the word purpose, goal. Where's everything going?
Right.
And so by that term, what I'm saying is that like where's this new creation that we're already in? Where is it going? And that's going to affect the educational pursuit. Now, if you look a lot of these, what we call imminent eschatologies of the 19th and 20th century, you'll see that that influences how they educate. So let's take, for example, a famous one, Marxism. Marxism has a view of where history is going, and it influenced how they educated, how they formed people, because they wanted to create the Soviet man. And so that was kind of what the teachers were involved in bringing about, okay? The term education, by the way, just means to lead out, okay, or to draw from within. And I use Plato as a good one to kind of explain what's the educational pursuit in those terms. But what I'm saying is the connection is you're leading them out into this reality, which actually is the ultimate reality. It is, if you want to say, the end, which is in the same ways, we're proclaiming the good news at the same time, the word evangelization, because we're saying that the one who has brought about this end is the Lord. And the whole educational pursuit is to form the students into the mind of Christ, into an image of the Lord, who is the image of God. So that's how we should start viewing Catholic education.
And contrast that with the typical philosophy of education we run into today. What's like, and I'll let you talk about this. What's the end towards which educators are trying to propel their students today? It's certainly not becoming one in mind with the Lord Jesus Christ.
So
it's a degree at Princeton.
But to what end? What are they serving? So. In America in the 1980s and 90s, there's a very popular philosophy called neoliberalism, which kind of said that the end to which the whole of history is going is like democratic capitalism. And so if you want to say like to be good in that world is what we're going to form people into. And so maybe like if you want to say the Lord of our age, I don't want to throw Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk under the bus, but this kind of engineer who's good in the market, who's tech savvy. Perhaps that is in some ways the image into which we're educating people. Like parents and teachers need to honestly ask themselves, well, wait a minute. If my student became like worldly successful, like a worldly success, like Elon Musk, if Jeff Bezos, or became like St. Francis of Assisi, which one would I prefer? And I think a lot of us would say probably Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Yeah. So that's kind of like what I'm trying to get people to think about. Like, that they in some ways represent the end to which success. What does it represent? What is that like reality that has the ultimate, or if you want to say, last word? But we believe that the last word is a different word. It's namely the Word incarnate, the Lord Jesus Christ.
I think that's a great place to end. That's very thought-provoking, and I think I'm going to be thinking about that for a while, this idea of who would you rather your child be, St. Francis of Assisi or Elon Musk. I think we all should think about that a little bit. So thanks a lot,
Thank
Robert.
you, Matt.
And for all of you watching, we've got lots of good stuff waiting inside of the Word on Fire Institute, so be sure to go check it out, sign up, wordonfire.institute. We'll be waiting for you inside. And don't forget the Word on Fire Institute YouTube page. Go and subscribe. And like I said, we'll see you inside.